everybody, yeah, this is a bit of a mashup video addressing this user called Teal Deer, who I've got to say is a thoroughly obnoxious human being. I would say is more obnoxious than Thunderfoot and Sargon put together. I think the obnoxiousness of these people gets worse the sort of further down we dig down the kind of misogynistic, anti-feminist pit, if you like. Yeah, just to be clear, if you're watching this, Teal Deer, I am not interested in opening up a dialogue with you, okay? Because, like I said, you are a thoroughly obnoxious and disgusting human being. I'm really just interested in addressing a number of things that you are wrong about. Because in your own channel description, you do openly admit that you use common sense, which is a term so vague it could mean anything, and Google search. And you seem to think Google search, this ability you have to Google things, somehow it gives you some kind of magic ability. You seem to think you have some kind of knowledge here that the whole of academia and that the whole of the rest of the world doesn't have. You seem to think they don't have access to Google either. So basically, you seem to think you know more than the whole of academia, the whole of feminism, and the whole of social justice in general, because you can Google things, and you continually use things like Google Dictionary and Wikipedia as though they are somehow academic sources. You don't even really interpret a lot of these things very well either, which we shall get to. But here we go. So basically, I've just chopped up a few chunks from certain videos of his. Obviously, I can't cover everything, and I'm not willing to spend a huge amount of time on someone as repulsive as this. But here we go.
The definition of feminism that I work with, and most people who identify themselves as feminists work with, is the fight for the equality of the sexes.
As opposed to the actual definition, which says equality for women. You will notice that the word that has in its definition the equality for all people is egalitarian. Seriously, take a moment to compare these two words. They are actually very different in their meaning.
Okay, so you clearly don't understand what equality means. You seem to think somewhat it's possible to only fight for equality for women and not for men. That's very odd, okay? You do understand equality for women and equality for men are the same thing, right? They're the same thing, because if something's equal, something can't be equal on its own, it has to be equal to something else, okay? I mean, do you get that? Do you understand if we have a glass that is half empty, right, and a glass that is half full, they're the same thing, okay? Do you understand that? There is no difference between something being half empty and half full. The only difference really is how we're perceiving it, you know, how we are perceiving this thing as being half empty or half full. That's what you don't seem to get. I don't know how I could explain that, you know. It's like 3 plus 2 is 5, okay? But what about 2 plus 3? That's what it sounds like when people say, what about equality for men? That's basically the question you're asking. It's nonsense. It's absolutely meaningless. But regarding egalitarianism, yeah, that's the next thing I want to come on to.
I think that feminism is both kick-ass and super important.
Firstly, you would. Secondly, those definitions that you have up on the screen really do not accurately reflect feminism and are much more of an egalitarian sentiment.
Now, the way people such as yourself, this whole breed of anti-feminist, anti-social justice kind of people seem to view egalitarianism, by the way, is not at all referenced in, let's have a look at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Egalitarian philosophy. We'll look at the entry under egalitarianism. Now it says, egalitarianism is a trend of thought in political philosophy, and egalitarian favours equality of some sort. Right, that's important to note, some sort. People should get the same, or be treated the same, or be treated as equals in some respect. An alternative view expands on this last mentioned option. So there's an alternative view This egalitarianism is not just one thing. This is something you don't seem to understand. People should be treated as equals, should treat one another as equals, should relate as equals, or enjoy an equality of social status of some sort. Egalitarian doctrines tend to rest on a background idea that all human persons are equal in fundamental worth or moral status. So far as the Western European and Anglo-American philosophical tradition is concerned, one significant source of this thought is the Christian notion that God loves all human souls equally. Egalitarianism is a protean doctrine because there are several different types of equality or ways in which people might be treated the same or might relate as equals. That might be thought desirable. In modern democratic societies, the term egalitarian is often used to refer to a position that favours, for any of a wide array of reasons, a greater degree of equality of income and wealth across persons than currently exists. So this really, it doesn't reflect your view of gender, because you already seem to think equality exists. That's really the kind of egalitarianism people such as yourself advocate for. You seem to think it's something that just already exists, and therefore it's a done deal. I'm going to skim on a little bit here. Okay, preliminary distinctions. Egalitarianism is a contested concept in social and political thought. One might care about human equality in many ways, for many reasons. As currently used, the label egalitarian does not necessarily indicate that the doctrine so-called holds that it is desirable that people's condition be made the same in any respect, or that people ought to be treated the same in any respect. An egalitarian might rather be one who maintains that people ought to be treated as equals, as possessing equal fundamental worth and dignity, and as equally morally considerable. In this sense, a sample non-egalitarian would be one who believes that people born into a higher social caste or a favoured race or ethnicity, or with an above-average stock of traits deemed desirable, ought somehow to count for more than others in calculations that determine what morally ought to be done. On the thought that the core egalitarian ideal is treating people as equals, see Dworkin 2000, further norms of equality of condition or treatment might be viewed as freestanding or derived from the claim of equality of status. Controversy also swirls around attempts to specify the class of beings to whom egalitarian norms apply. Some might count all and only human beings as entitled to equality of status. Some would hold that all and only persons have equal moral status, with the criteria of personhood excluding some humans from qualifying, e.g. the unborn fetus or severely demented adult human, including some non-humans, e.g. intelligent beings inhabiting regions of outer space beyond Earth. Some would hold that sentient beings such as non-human primates that do not satisfy criteria of personhood are entitled to equal moral status. Along with persons, some advance other views. Egalitarianism can be instrumental or non-instrumental, given a specification of some aspect of people's condition or mode of treating them that should be equal. One might hold that the state of affairs in which the stated equality obtains is morally valuable either as an end or as a means. The instrumental egalitarian values equality as a means to some independently specifiable goal. The non-instrumental egalitarian values equality for its own sake, as an end or as partly constitutive of some end. For example, someone who believes that the maintenance of equality across a group of people fosters relations of solidarity and community among them, and is desirable for that reason, qualifies as an instrumental egalitarian. Someone who believes that equality of some sort is a component of justice and morally acquired as such would be a non-instrumental egalitarian. And so on and so on. Long story short, there are a lot of different types of egalitarianism. It's not one thing. It is not one single philosophy. Politically, egalitarianism has often been used to refer to communism. Is that something you support? I don't know. Either way, this is not a philosophy that focuses on the issue of gender. Right? It is too broad to focus on that. Gender is a very important issue. Gender issues are part of the broader issue, and as such there is a need for a focus group, some kind of group that actually will focus on these issues. You think these issues are so small that they can just be swallowed up by some bigger movement, right? But you don't even seem to know what that movement is. You think egalitarianism as a word just has some very simple meaning that we can that we can use, which it doesn't apply to what the things you believe. By the way, you are a racist, a homophobe, a transphobe, and an obvious misogynist. So you just are not an egalitarian in any sense. Any of these senses that you would be trying to use it. You are this brand of egalitarian. When you use the word, you want to say that we are already equal. That's how you like to use the word. You like to imply that we have already achieved equality. That is how you and yours like to use the word egalitarian. And it doesn't apply. It is not recognised by the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and nor is it ever likely to be.
Find me one example in the Western world where any type of person is legally discriminated against in any capacity.
I'm feminist because my first boyfriend sexually assaulted me, and when I went to my friends for help, they called me a slut.
Well, I guess your friends are just assholes then. Also, I'm pretty sure your first boyfriend did not sexually assault you, because if he did, you would have gone to the police, because sexual assault is a crime.
Okay, so there we have a couple of examples of you using, unwittingly, as it seems, using the legalistic fallacy. And you clearly don't know what that is, and that's where you assume, because something is written in law, that it must be recognised in practice. There's plenty of things that are written down in law that don't get recognised in practice. Okay, there's plenty of things that people should be being prosecuted for, but aren't. Okay? Just because something's written in law doesn't mean people are recognising that in practice. It doesn't mean the authorities are enforcing that law. Well, they're not enforcing that law as much as they're enforcing other laws. Okay, that's pretty simple to understand. I struggle to think of it. I struggle to imagine that you have never encountered any situation where you feel the authorities in question haven't enforced the rules in the way they should.
So the first study that you link to is not actually a study at all. It is in fact just the abstract of the study.
Well, yeah, what do you expect her to link to? Okay, I mean, the abstract is a way of getting you into the article. That's the first thing you usually see when you read an article. Okay, the idea is it gives you a brief summary, and then you go on to read the full article, which you might have to pay for, I'm afraid, because, academics don't work for free. But it's quite ridiculous of you to not understand this. Yes, it's a bit like saying, opening a book and saying, this is just the introduction, this isn't the rest of the book.
And let's not forget that sneaky little pay gap.
You mean that non-existent one?
Find us a peer-reviewed article by a proper economist that confirms that the pay gap is a myth.
And here are a few of my reasons why.
I really hope that you're not now going to list a load of first world problems or issues that don't even affect women and tell us that somehow feminism is going to save us all.
Well, let's look at what she actually has to say.
I'm a feminist because I believe that the world should be safe for girls, everywhere. Because half the girls in Yemen will become child brides. Because 65% of Brazilians believe that a woman who dresses in revealing clothes deserves to be raped. Because in Saudi Arabia, women still can't vote or drive. I'm a feminist because in every corner of the world, every day, women's bodies are used as a battleground in wars started by men. Raped, beaten, sold into slavery, mutilated, burned with acid.
And what do you have to say?
And yes, all of the massive problems that you've cited come from the third world. Yet you quite happily sit around complaining about problems in the first world, even when you know that there are these atrocities happening elsewhere.
So the fact that she's addressed third world issues isn't enough. She has to be addressing them, and only addressing them. Let's look at a clip from one of your other videos again, just to show how inconsistent you are.
Also, the way you keep talking about the world, it really makes me think like you are referring to third world countries again. Places that, yes, have absolutely massive issues that do need to be fixed. But guess what? You are not the freaking world police. Other countries have other governments who will run their countries as they damn well please. You are not part of the electorate of that country. You are not part of the government of that country. You have no right to dictate what they should and should not do.
So, if feminists aren't talking about the third world, they're just a bunch of selfish, spoiled brats. But if they are talking about it, then according to you, they're trying to police the world and they should stop. So they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. Yeah, you haven't really thought this one through, have you?
I'm a feminist because people still say that asexual, bisexual, and trans folk don't exist.
And this is an issue for those people and their decriers, not feminism.
I'm a feminist because same-sex marriage is a no-brainer. Because in 34 states, it's legal to discriminate against someone who's transgender. Really?
Really?
Gay marriage and the legal rights of trans people are issues for gay people and trans people, not feminists. Feminists do not understand privilege, especially white privilege. In fact, it seems really weird that feminists are even concerning themselves with a racist issue at all, considering they're supposed to be all about women's rights. But, hey-ho, such is life, I suppose.
Now, here we have an example of how you don't understand what's known as intersectionality theory, or kyriarchy. And this is the notion that a person can be privileged in one sense, but underprivileged in another. For example, let's say we've got two men. One is disabled, physically disabled, but has lots of money, very rich. And then we've got another man who is able-bodied completely, but is very poor, essentially working class. Now, in this situation, our first man has class privilege. He is privileged in the sense he has more money, but he is underprivileged in the sense that he is disabled. He experiences prejudice or discrimination because of that. Vice versa with the other guy. The other guy does not have class privilege. He is underprivileged in that sense, but he has able-bodied privilege. I think that's pretty simple to understand. A person can be privileged in one sense, but not in another. How does this apply to feminism? Why? Well, this sort of should explain to you why feminists discuss things like racism, homophobia, transphobia, etc. Now, one of the things certainly second wave feminism was quite rightly, in my opinion, criticised for was for being predominantly concerned with the needs of white middle class heterosexual cisgendered women. So these were women who understood the concept of privilege and being underprivileged when it came to being a woman, but they didn't seem to recognise there were other ways in which a person might be privileged or underprivileged. And this is something they were quite rightly criticised for, and these issues have been addressed by certain people, and that is why we are now swimming in the third wave of feminism, which was started by a black woman, or at least the term was third wave was coined by her, and yeah, that's where we are now. We're in a much more intersectional type of feminism, which recognises that it has to address issues such as racism, transphobia, homophobia. It can't simply ignore those and just say, nope, we're just discussing sexism, because these issues overlap. Okay, they affect how a person perceives the world, and they therefore have to be discussed. And there are still people within feminism who object to this approach. Okay, we're still clinging to this old hat idea. But, you know, there are feminists, sadly, who are transphobic, and some who are homophobic, and some who are racist, which is a shame. But you see, they're the sort of feminists you and your kind could actually make a good case against, if you could be bothered. But you don't. You spend all your time, you don't ever call out these transphobic, homophobic, racist feminists. You don't ever call them out. The ones you choose to spend pretty much all your time arguing with and misrepresenting and slagging off are the ones who are the exact opposite of that, just as you're doing now, you know, with people like Lacey Green or people like those pesky dames and so on. These are the people who view society in a very intersectional way. They approach problems in an intersectional way. but you seem to have a problem with the fact they're doing that. And by the way, just a bit of fun information here. The kind of feminist, you know how people like you think feminists hate men, right? And you'll usually scrape around the internet to find some obscure blog somewhere where someone says she thinks all men should be castrated or something, and then you use that as some kind of winning card, some kind of trump card. Yeah, there, I've debunked the whole of feminism with this weird blog I found somewhere after 6 hours of searching through Google. You see, the man-hating kind of people who identify as feminists, they tend to be these people who are also transphobic, homophobic, and racist. In my experience, at least, they all tend to kind of fall under the same little section. Particularly with the transphobia, I don't think that's a coincidence, because you see, transphobic feminists, you see, transphobic people in general, which, let's bear in mind, you are transphobic yourself, they don't see trans women as real women. They just see them as men. And if you're someone who hates men, you're going to think, yeah, I don't want men coming into my space. I don't want men invading here. So when these people see trans women, when they don't recognise them as women, they just see them as men. They just see it as men trying to get into their movement. And that's why I think the man-hating kind of feminist and the transphobic kind of feminist, they tend to be usually one and the same. And racism, I think, also ties in with this, because usually when you're a supremacist of some kind, you tend to think people who are the more like me someone is, the more I will accept them. The less like me someone is, the less likely I am to accept them. So these are the sort of people you could actually, not you, but people who are critical of feminism could actually be making a strong case against. But most of the criticism of these people doesn't come from the likes of you. In fact, you have a lot more in common with these people than either you or they would ever like to admit. Most of the criticism of these people comes from within feminism, and it comes from people like Lacey Green, or from those pesky dames, or these other people who you continually seem to get on your high horse and think that you have some business educating them. These are the people who actually not only try and solve the problems outside of feminism, they solve the problems within it. So this is why I don't take a lot of critics of feminism seriously, because there are things they could criticise. Transphobia, homophobia, racism and so on, but they don't seem to bother. They just want to slag off the people who are actually the most accepting of men, and the most tolerant, and the most intersectional. So yeah, in short, you don't understand intersectionality theory. Try looking it up. Furthermore, this woman who you're arguing with here actually fucking says that she's using intersectionality theory. She actually says it in the video you're responding to. She says she's using intersectionality theory, and it seems to completely go over your head. Surprise, surprise.
A series where we explore the social, the political, and the media from a feminist and intersectional perspective.
And yeah, pregnancy and birth are hard, but you know what? They're getting easier, because as soon as a woman gets into any pain, they stick her on morphine! Also, cesarean sections are a thing.
Okay, I'm going to read you some information from the NHS website about morphine. Okay, family planning and pregnancy. Most medicines in some way can affect the development of a baby in the womb. The effect on the baby differs between medicines and also depends on the stage of pregnancy that you have reached when you take the medicine. In the case of morphine sulfate, the use of this medicine during pregnancy or labour is not recommended. You should only take this medicine during pregnancy if your doctor thinks that you need it. If you take this medicine for long periods of time, or if it is taken repeatedly during your pregnancy, your baby may have some problems after birth. You need to discuss your specific circumstances with your doctor to weigh up the overall risks and benefits of taking this medicine. You and your doctor can make a decision about whether you are going to take this medicine during pregnancy. If the decision is that you should not have morphine sulfate, then you should discuss whether there is an alternative medicine that you should take during pregnancy. So, yeah, you don't understand morphine, okay? Morphine is not just some magic thing you can just dope people up with and expect everything to be fine, okay? It's actually really not recommended, as we heard there. for women in labour. As for your comment about caesarean sections, they aren't a picnic either, Teal, my dear. I don't know. This is cutting someone's gut open and pulling their baby out, leaving a rather big scar. Okay, this is not just some walk in the park. I just think that you and I, Teal, being men, I don't really think we should just dismissively talk about things like caesarean sections like they're no big deal.
A third of people in the UK believe that a woman is partially or totally responsible for her own rape if she was flirting. Flirting is not consent. She isn't responsible.
I am just going to call bullshit here. If you are flirting with someone, you know that you are flirting with them, and you know exactly what the purpose of flirting is. While that doesn't excuse rape, it still very heavily implies consent. But don't just take my word for it. Here is the opinion of Camille Paglia, a notable feminist author.
But let's set up two possible scenarios. I can see someone saying, all right, a woman goes out with a man, they wind up in a sexual situation, the signals are ambiguous, he has reason to believe that she thinks it's okay, she later interprets it differently, maybe even differently than she felt at the time, and places a different label on it, and these are no sorts of guidelines to run a railroad with.
Right.
I can understand that. On the other hand, I don't think that to qualify as rape, somebody has to jump out of the bushes carrying a club. What if we're out on a date, and you've consented to go out on a date with me, we have a conversation, we wind up back at my room. Just because we're in my room doesn't mean you've consented to anything that I can impose upon you.
I disagree with this. I feel that, again, through my study of history, that unchaperoned dating is a relatively recent phenomenon, and it's largely confined to the industrialized democracies. I feel that every day is potentially a sexual encounter. What else is it, all right? If a woman is not interested in sex, she must signal that from the start. She should not be going to a man's room alone. She should not be getting into a car with a strange man. These people can be Ted Bundys, all right? Look, we have to go back to the fact that it was my generation, the 60s generation, that broke all the rules. When I was in high school in the early 60s, we were protected as young women. We were expected to be virgins. Only tramps went to bed with the young guys, right? Now, in college, we're the ones who said to the campuses, get out of our sex lives. We were imprisoned in all-women dorms. We had to be in 11 o'clock at night and sign in. We said, let us make our own mistakes. They said, it is dangerous. You will be raped. We said, the price of freedom is risking rape. Now, what's happened today is that young women have inherited the freedoms that my generation won, but they do not realize that with that freedom come risks and responsibilities. Now, again, I'm saying sex is a dangerous and unstable, it's a combustible force. You cannot predict how someone is going to behave. A very rational person, male or female, can suddenly behave irrationally if you push the wrong button, because all kinds of things come flowing out of you that are nonverbal, that are beneath the conscious realm. But Freud was thrown out of the feminist movement 20 years ago by Kate Millett, who declared him a sexist. So what I'm saying is that we're not even aware of things which can suddenly erupt up, all right? Things can lead, I mean, gay men have known for centuries that the price of sex can be death. Gay men, since the time of ancient Rome, were going down to the docks, into the alleyways, and ending up beaten up and dead, all right? What is this sentimentality that the glorious Steinem wing of feminism has created around the issue of sex? It's supposed to be completely this totally risk-free, cotton candy thing. Everything is wonderful, and the slightest thing that's disturbing or abusive is somehow, it's always coming from men. Men are generating it. I am saying women are giving signals, nonverbal signals that they're not aware of, okay? If a girl goes to a fraternity party dressed like Madonna, is drinking 11 tequilas, and goes up to a man's room, she is communicating below the level of language. I'm sorry, it does not do any good to say no always means no. Now I'm saying no. To go to a man's room is, in effect, to consent to sex. This is what I want to bring back. Right? I'm pro-sex. I'm saying go with it. Go with it, girl, okay? Go with it. Have the adventure, but stop whining when you wake up hungover the next day, and he doesn't call, and he doesn't send flowers, and then the feminists come around and convince you you've been raped.
So if I call you up for a date, and I pick you up and you get in the car, have you now placed yourself in such danger that no matter what I do, you've got no claim against me?
No, but what I'm saying is that my number one concern is the dignity and freedom of women. All right? I'm saying the dignity and freedom of women will not be achieved by overprotection of women. All right? It will be achieved by women taking personal responsibility for themselves and deciding what they want and being upfront about their sexual desires. I want women to want sex as much as men want sex.
That is what a feminist looks like, ladies.
Yeah, I don't really care if Camille Paglia calls herself a feminist any more than I give a shit if Christina Hoff Sommers calls herself a feminist. Okay, it's of no concern of mine. What she is someone with some ridiculous, completely incompatible philosophical and political views, and yeah, I just don't give a shit about them. I don't know how to explain to you how wrong you are here. I think if you can't understand consent on such an obvious level, I don't think any amount of explaining this can do you. If you think going to someone's hotel room, just going to their room constitutes consent, unwithdrawable consent, I don't know how I could possibly correct you on that. You know, if you can't understand that yourself, I don't know what amount of explanation on my part or the part of anyone else could possibly do any good. I find this utterly staggering. I find this completely ridiculous. And sometimes it is worth having discussions about this kind of thing. It is worth sometimes getting into discussions about the nuances of consent, or sex as an issue and rape as an issue. I just do not think you are one of those people. I think if you cannot understand consent on such a basic and obvious level, by whatever stage you are in your life, I don't know how old you are or whatever, but I can honestly tell you at no stage of my life, not when I was in my teens or when I was in my 20s or now in my 30s, have I ever thought what you think now. I have never, this long before I ever had any interest in feminism or knew what feminism was about, have I ever thought that because someone goes to someone's hotel room, that constitutes consent to sex. I mean, does this work? This is probably the best thing I can do. I'll use an analogy, because I know people such as yourself love analogies. I mean, does this work the other way around? Teal Deer, if you go to someone's hotel room, you go to some guy's hotel room, and he decides he wants to fuck you up the ass, you know, even though you don't want him to. I mean, does that not rape? Is that consensual? In your opinion, is that consensual sex, or is there a different rule that applies to you? I mean, there is plenty from this idiot's channel I could pick apart. I could spend all day doing this. A lot of his stuff is stock anti-feminist nonsense. It is stock misogyny that has been debunked many times. But these are just some bits that stuck out to me that are complete doozies I wanted to shoot down. And this person is not worth engaging in any kind of serious dialogue. He's a truly disgusting nitwit. The things he's not in any kind of position to be trying to school anyone or talk about who does or does not understand what. You know, coming from this platform of I've got Google search, and so it's something that everyone, you know, something not everyone has. Well, I know how to use Wikipedia, and so this gives this guy some kind of platform from which to educate everyone else. This guy doesn't understand any of the things he talks about. There may be certain things in the world he understands, but if there are, he has never made a video about any of them. So this is pretty much the only video I want to make about this guy. I don't want to occupy my whole channel just debunking his stuff. I may do some other ones if I really feel inclined to. But nonetheless, this is a pretty typical example. People like, by the way, Thunderfoot, Sargon, the Amazing Atheist, people like this are your creation. Okay, you have spawned this kind of disgusting creature. Okay, you this is on you. Okay, you have spewed this kind of subhuman onto the internet, and this might just be worth taking a long, hard look at yourselves about. I doubt that's going to happen with any of you, but hey, I'm just pointing that out. You know, this is the bastard, out of control child of yours, of your stupid pseudo philosophy. So, let me know what you think, everyone. Goodbye.